Thank you so much, Samantha. Hi everyone, my name is Shumela Ahmed and I am the Managing Director at Resilience Learning Partnership, and I was just frantically trying to find an image that I just put onto this first PowerPoint slide here, because Sam made me aware there that some people may not have been following the project the whole way. You may just have came across the AV work, which means you may just came across us as well. So I've just put that there as a wee reminder to say, go have a look, look us up online, read that, and it'll tell you a lot more about who we are and what we do. Ultimately, we're a lived experience-led organisation, and that's very much the role that we play in this project. But I don't want to take up too much time today talking about who we are at RLP. I really want to talk to you today about resources and capacity. I suppose we're slightly a bit of an anomaly in this space, unless there's another lived experience-led organisation here. And that from inception, we have been lived experience-led. So a lot of what we do has been done from inception, as I said. I understand a lot of you guys will just be beginning that journey of both things like trauma-informed practice, but very much embedding lived experience within your organisation. And a tenet of trauma-informed practice is that it cannot be trauma-informed unless it's informed by those with lived experience of trauma. So for us in the beginning and wanting to be an aspiration of being a trauma-informed organisation, lived experience-led was where it all began. You can find out more about us and what we do and the different work we're involved in, but this is one of our most exciting projects, and it's absolutely amazing to work alongside experts like Improvement Service and Safe Lives. We're all quite different organisations, but I think we all hold pretty much the same values, and we've built a lovely relationship, and we're continuing to do that throughout the project, which is actually essential in embedding lived experience in any of the work that you're doing. It will all rest upon relationships. So I've literally, if anybody in this space that knows me, they'll be shocked to know I've only created 2 slides, which is nothing. So I'm just going to go through this bullet point list where I've made some notes to the side. And I'm going to start with a saying that we often say, a wee quote we use in the trauma world, which is start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. When I often hear about the words resource and capacity, straight away for me it often means what else have we got to do, or what have we not got to do this. And sometimes we just need to start where we are and use what we do have and do whatever we can with that. Last week, the last deep dive was a few weeks ago, and I've been watching that actually over the weekend, and the previous speakers, the previous topic was risk and safety, and the first speaker spoke really greatly about some of the stuff that we need to consider there. However, when we're starting this type of work, we shouldn't be starting from a fear-based place. There's still lots of fear around working with lived experience. I totally get it, and that's okay. I'm sure people will have seen it go wrong, and people will want to do it really safely and do it really well, and that's absolutely fine as well. But let's not come to this from a fear-based place. Let's come to it, like the last speaker in the last deep dive said, from a place of seeing what opportunity lies there. Whilst always thinking about risk and safety and resources and capacity and stuff like that. I think it's just really important we don't come from that fear-based place. We look at this as a real opportunity. It'll get us started off from a good start. For us at RLP, we believe, and the kind of one of the fundamentals for us is lived experience is the resource. It's been the missing resource for so long. We have amazing other evidence-based resources, training, frameworks, all of that. What has been missing is, I think, the view of lived experience and what lived experience can actually bring. When you begin to work with lived experience in a truly authentic and meaningful way, that's when you start to see the real gifts, skills, assets that exist. And our role, I think, as professionals, many of us have been trained. We have lots of really great, useful skills. We have lots of resources already at our disposal in the organisations that we work in. We can't forget that as as well. But I think we always look at lived experience as this add-on thing, this extra thing that we've got to do. And we might have a really kind of linear view of it. As a lived experience-led organisation, 95% of our staff have lived experience of complex trauma. And of course, that means certain things like we've really got to look after our workforce well-being. We've got to protect time, make sure that we're all being looked after and taking care of ourselves. We do lots of things to ensure that. We have 6 weekly wellbeing sessions delivered from an external provider. Every 6 weeks this happens for all 15 of us. Everybody from our cleaner to myself, who's the MD, is able to go along and participate in that space. Every other 6 weeks, we have what we call trauma-informed org sessions. Again, protected time that we come together. That's about holding a mirror up to the organisation and beginning to look at how do we really embed lived experience and trauma-informed practice, but how do we tackle and prepare staff and skill them up for the implementation part of that, which is where it can get a bit sticky and a bit messy. So, and another thing we've got coming up next week, which I'm so looking forward to, is we introduced 3 quarters ago pause week. So that's a full week where we don't necessarily down tools, but what we do is come inside for an internal focus, internal meetings only, internal work only. That might mean we're working on projects that we're doing with other partners, but it's all internal that we do internal meetings. We don't have any external meetings next week at all, which is absolutely amazing. It's the lived experience of trauma in our organisation and us understanding and being able to acknowledge what that sometimes means in this area of work, and us not moving on needing to look after all of our well-being together to ensure that we can continue to do the work that we do, because it isn't dead easy. It gets easier with time and with practice and with experience, but it is tough work regardless of having lived experience or not. But this view that actually lived experience is the resources is how we started out at RLP. Lived experience, I don't think, is utilised in the sector enough, and we don't see it as something that can enhance learning and development, which is how we see it at Resilience Learning Partnership. So it's about supporting organisations and staff to be better at their roles, to do this stuff better, to include the voice of lived experience. That in itself for us is starting to bring lived experience in a very, very different way. It is an asset in itself if we can scaffold and support the structures that might be needed to bring lived experience into our workplaces more often, more regularly, and through our learning and development lens. They're doing this stuff down in NHS England really, really well within a very particular area within mental health, but a lot of co-facilitation, co-delivery, co-design of the new resources that are training the professionals that work in that particular area. So this can be done, and we'll hear how it's being done in lots of different ways from everyone who's presenting today. There are, as I said, there's many different ways to do that, and we'll hear that today. This is not a one-size-fits-all. It cannot be a one-size-fits-all when you're working with lived experience, especially lived experience of complex trauma. It will throw up all sorts of things along the way. Budget's absolutely essential, and another thing that comes to mind when I think about resources and capacity, and we need to do that from the start. It's not something we can just think about at the end. So budgets planned for this type of work need to be happening at the same time as everything else that you're doing or you would be required to do for this piece of work. The quality implementation framework that's coming soon from NES and Improvement Service will really help with this. It's got a whole section on budgets. I can't believe it. There's 7 sections in it, and there's one on budgets, trauma-informed budgets. This is the stuff of dreams for me. It really, really is. We can't get away from it if there's a whole section there, if there's templates and advice and tools and all of that, and hopefully a bit of a push from those in power to be looking at something like this if we want to implement trauma-informed practice within our organisations. The QIF will be a great tool for all of us in the sector. However, capacity and resources is not just about the money. It really, really isn't. And the who of the who of your ingredients, as we say at RLP, is just as essential as having the budgets and the funding to support and scaffold this. The people that do this work, that deliver this work, that work in unison with people with lived experience to embed their insight into your service design, your organisation delivery, they need to be experienced practitioners. They need to be people who know how to do this work, who are experienced in it, and who don't mind getting involved in what we call the mess, because it will get messy. If you're doing lived experience work and it doesn't get a bit messy at times, you're not doing it right. It will get messy at times. It's just about having people who are able to work through and in and out of the mess. I would always advise that you take a assets-based community development approach, a trauma-informed assets-based community development approach, because actually that builds capacity in itself. That's where that idea of lived experience being a resource, you know, the vision for me is that we have lived experience hubs, communities of practice across the country that could be nurtured and developed by NHS trusts, local authorities. If we think about a wellbeing economy model, it all feeds into lots of Scotland's plans for the future that it wants to have. Big, powerful entities nurturing, you know, new, growing, sometimes already existing communities, groups, lived experience-led orgs that are doing this right and truly representing lived experience in their work. They could be nurtured and developed by our bigger, powerful statutory services to be knowledge hubs of learning and development that we can create together, and that will be a lasting, sustainable resource well into the future and long after I've retired and moved to Spain with my lovely husband. In regards to capacity, this is not a one-person job. You can't just land this stuff on somebody's desk and say, right, it's your responsibility to bring lived experience into your organisation, all of our work and our new projects. That's just not going to cut it anymore. And if anyone was at the last deep dive or is looking over the recorded session, again, the first speaker, Dr. Caroline Bruce from NES, says that when we're working in risk and safety as well, that this isn't down to individuals or one person. This is a collective responsibility. This is an organisational responsibility. If you're going to become trauma-informed, you need to embed lived experience within your organisation. So it isn't a one-person job. This is an organisational responsibility from leadership right down to the coalface and those who are actually delivering services. And for me, really what this is about is us beginning to work differently. So resource and capacity for me always throws up a lot of excuse making, sometimes moaning, you know, questions about money, finance, how are we going to do this, how are we going to do this? This is actually about us beginning to work differently and how we work. If we're not creating capacity to bring lived experience for where we're at now, kind of in the world, to bring lived experience into our organisations and to help us inform how they're designed and how they're delivered, what are we doing? What are we doing in our roles? Now, I know some of you might challenge me on that and say, I'm delivering frontline services and women need this and they need that. And I know they do. We deliver a couple of frontline services as well. We experience those strains and stresses as well, but we never ever stray away from constantly, well, you know, 95% of us have lived experience, so that's where the anomaly is. But if you look within your organisation, you start to look at the stats on violence against women and girls and complex trauma in Scotland. If you're in an organisation with more than 3 or 4 people, then you've lived experience in your organisation as well. So that's something else to tap into. You also need to do that safely, but it's also something to keep in mind that you may have people with lived experience already in your organisation, so you're doing this for them. But so much of this for us at RLP, it's about how we work differently now, how we bring lived experience, an essential part of our role. If there was new software out or some new legislation or some new guidance, the child protection guidance hits everybody's desks quite soon, everybody will find capacity to do that. Lived experience is essential in becoming a trauma-informed organisation. You cannot do it unless you embed lived experience within your service design. So yeah, what are we doing if we're not creating capacity for this? As I've said before, workforce wellbeing is absolutely essential for capacity to us all, absolutely every one of us. It's not It's not, that is also not an add-on. Staff need to feel cared for and experience what that feels like from their employer to be able to be well enough to do just their day job, never mind this stuff. It should be absolutely essential, but it's also essential in becoming a trauma-informed organisation. It's one of the key drivers. And as I said before, taking that assets-based community development approach, I think, allows us to then start creating these kind of hubs, these places where knowledge and insight can flourish, it can develop, it can grow, and it can actually really help us all as well in the process. Resources, so we use a lot of different resources at RLP. We don't have a model for what we do. We've been in existence for 4.5 years and we don't have a model. We use lots of other approaches, models. Some people might call it a bit of a social pedagogic approach that we have, because we acknowledge that what works with one person might not work with another. That's the nature of trauma. We have our own kind of values, and we never ever stray far from the guiding principles of trauma-informed practice, but we also use lots of other approaches. I'm a teacher by trade. A lot of what I do comes via an education kind of ethos and ethics base about wanting to share knowledge and inspire people to realise their own gifts and skills and what they can be and do in the future and aspire to. So many different approaches we are using, and we don't stick too hard to any one. We're using them all at any one time. These resources are essential in our toolbox. So you'll see the National Trauma Training Plan there. That's kind of where it all started for us. We're co-authors of that. But there's some great stuff there. So I've seen in the last video as well, so many people were holding up this book. This book is essential if you're doing anything to do with co-design of services. It's called Beyond Sticky Notes, and it's written by a woman who works with Indigenous communities in New Zealand, and I think it really relates to a lot of what we do here in Scotland. It's a fantastic resource. The art of co-production there is also a brilliant resource for getting out on the table practically and using when you're working with groups of lived experience, as well as the inclusive justice piece here as well from Strathclyde Uni, which is a bit of a how-to on how to do many different variations of lived experience work, from bringing people in and focus groups to longer running steering groups and oversight groups and all of that kind of stuff, and explores a wee bit as well about lived experience leadership, which the bottom two documents here, the lived experience leadership and the value of lived experience and social change, absolutely essential reading for anybody embarking on both trauma-informed practice implementation and embedding lived experience within your organisation. This gives you insight into some of the challenges and barriers that still exist within lived experience leadership and lived experience work in general. And the last one, the wee orange one, it's all about power, is a new addition to this slide, just in this morning. But that's because I've just finished reading it twice and making notes and felt comfortable with putting it up. Absolutely brilliant piece of work from the Sheila McKechnie Foundation on power and how we need to start looking differently at power, and even listening to the last resources, risk and safety deep dive. There's some reading to be done on this document from that. I think we can all learn even just about the language that we use in regards to power and what that can often do for people with lived experience. So I was maybe talking longer than I was supposed to there. I'm so sorry. That's maybe 2 slides, which is terrible, but so lovely to speak to you all. I'm going to hand over to the amazing Jen Douglas now, and yeah, please go find us online and find out more about us if you don't know anything already.